We did this in school.
You want to go to school today?
No, house is closed. I tell you.
What?
Do you know I'm the eco rep?
What?
I'm the eco rep.
What's that?
So when you go to a class, yeah, you get a sticker. And when it runs out, you get stores and different stickers.
Do you miss school?
Yeah, because I like the stickers they give.
The school is closed till further notice. Guys, it's first day back at school. From Monday the 8th of March, Britain's final coronavirus lockdown will start to come to an end. First with the opening of all of Britain's schools and soon followed by outdoor sports facilities and many shops, with the bulk of openings that include universities to resume teaching students after Easter. So in about 2 months from now, by the middle of May, we will largely be living in a post-pandemic lockdowns world when we can all soon go on holiday at both home and abroad with our vaccine passports, which should mark the start of a near 2-year economic boom, given pent-up demand and £400 billion of money printing to date. Though with 5 million on furlough, then despite the coming boom, unemployment looks set to increase as 5 million workers find out whether they still have a job or not. And yes, masks will still need to be worn for some time, and mass testing will continue, especially whenever variants are detected. Nevertheless, the end is now in sight, all courtesy of Britain's highly successful vaccines programme, where the UK literally leads the world, out vaccinating every major developed nation, with the United States not far behind. The UK and US continue to recover well from the pandemic, whilst the EU is experiencing a far slower rate of recovery from the Chinese coronavirus pandemic, though from a much lower January coronavirus peak. Meanwhile, the likes of Brazil are doing their own thing and are heading towards new pandemic heights, where it should be noted that the quality of testing is far lower than in the UK, US and Europe, so the number of actual cases are likely many times official figures, which does pose a risk of more variants appearing and spreading over the coming weeks and months. The vaccines indicator gives the reason why the UK has managed to go from one of the worst infection rates to one of the least in less than 2 months, having now vaccinated over 30%, over 32% of the population, whilst the United States has done well to play catch up under Biden's administration to total near 24% of the population. Meanwhile, an inept, dysfunctional, blame everyone but themselves EU is unable to get its vaccinations act together and stands at just 7% vaccinated, whilst Brazil's COVID chaos is partially explained by the fact that only 4% are being vaccinated over there. Successful vaccination programs are also being borne out in the falling number of daily deaths, and explains why Brazil remains on an upwards death trend trajectory, and the lag in the reduction of the number of daily deaths in the EU and US, which on this chart shows up as an uptick, which likely is due to delayed reporting due to the recent snowstorm that hit southern US states, hopefully. So regardless of the anti-vaxxer noise in the blogosphere, the vaccines are clearly working, if not in preventing infections, then in terms of hospitalizations and deaths, as the graph illustrates, where the UK now has 1/3 the COVID patients in hospital, i.e. around 230 per million, then at the peak, and the US half, around 150 per mil, whilst the likes of France are up there at 400 against a peak of 500 per million, and Spain 500 against a peak of 670 per million. Though there is a fly in the ointment where the US is concerned, and that is the London variant, which is expected to become the dominant strain over the coming weeks and months. So, depending on the speed of vaccinations, the US could yet see a spike of sorts in hospitalizations and deaths. Meanwhile, France and Germany have finally given the go-ahead for the AstraZeneca vaccine to be used in the over 65s at least. This after near 2 months of no other than the French President Macron himself bad-mouthing the cheapest vaccine of the lot.
France has cleared the AstraZeneca vaccine for use in the over 65s, but that won't necessarily immediately undo a perception that this is an inferior vaccine or address how that perception is impacting the vaccine rollout in France. Here's why. On the 4th of January, this man, 82-year-old Brian Pinker, became the first person in the world to receive the AstraZeneca. The UK had cleared it for use in all ages. Later that month, the European Medicines Agency approved the jab for use in adults of all ages across the EU. But Emmanuel Macron was unconvinced, and rather than leaving the assessment of the vaccines to the scientists, he told us everything points to thinking it is quasi-ineffective in people older than 65. Except everything didn't point to that. The EU's agency said it expected the jab would give protection to over 65s, but that limited data prevented a definitive estimate on that yet. And two consequences followed. France declined to give the jab to the over 65s, and the French government continued to speak publicly in a way that cast doubt over the AstraZeneca vaccine. This is one minister talking about the UK's decision to use it on older people.
Les Britanniques sont dans une situation sanitaire extrêmement difficile.
The British are in an extremely difficult health situation. They are taking many risks in this vaccination campaign, and I can understand it, but they are taking many risks.
The French government was taking a different type of risk, the risk of creating an impression that this is a risky or less effective vaccine when the data does not suggest that. And certainly there's evidence that, for one reason or another, that perception is taking hold in France. The state news radio station France Info reported health workers were trying to avoid receiving AstraZeneca doses, which they regard as third-rate compared with the Rolls-Royce produced by Pfizer-BioNTech. Let's hear from one nurse.
What I see on the news and social media doesn't seem reassuring at all. It's very scary, so I'd rather wait a little longer and see how it goes.
So there are doubts, and there have been other consequences of France's decision to restrict the AstraZeneca vaccine for the over 65s. One of them is unused doses. Despite that huge row in January over the slow delivery of this vaccine, only a quarter of the AstraZeneca doses delivered to France have been used. The Guardian reports that it's a result of the French government focusing exclusively, and critics argue inflexibly, on vaccinating the oldest and most at-risk groups for whom the shot had not been approved, with no backup plan for using spare doses. So through February, hundreds of thousands of doses have gone unused, partly because of hesitancy, partly because they weren't refocused on the under 65s. Also in February, new evidence started to emerge about the AstraZeneca vaccine. A study in Scotland found that 4 weeks after receiving a vaccine, hospital admissions for people who'd had the Pfizer jab fell by 85%. For those who'd had the AstraZeneca, it was 94%. And we heard from President Macron again.
For me, the criterion is transparency, and everything has been transparent around AstraZeneca. My turn will come, but there's still time. If this vaccine is offered to me, I will, of course, take it.
Then, on Monday, we heard from the UK government's health secretary.
A single shot of either the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine or of the Pfizer vaccine works against severe infection among the over 70s with a more than 80% reduction in hospitalizations.
And on the same day as that statement, the French health minister announced a change of policy.
From now on, all people who are 50 years old and over and who have what are called comorbidities, such as diabetes, hypertension, or a history of cancer, can be vaccinated with AstraZeneca.
Now, that's a significant shift, and one which the French government would argue has simply followed available data. The question is whether the way the government spoke about AstraZeneca planted doubts that will cause issues long after the regulators have given the all clear.
Macron and all the other EU critics should get on their hands and knees and apologise to the hard-working scientists of Oxford AstraZeneca. Yet it is the French, German and European peoples who have paid the price in lives lost due to the incompetence of a corrupt and inept European Union's mishandling of the vaccinations programme, which continues to this very day. All because they didn't want to buy a British vaccine from AstraZeneca because of Brexit. What a bunch of... And whilst those like me who are still waiting for the vaccine knock on the door, then I continue to take 4,000 IU of vitamin D most days. I should take it every day, but I forget sometimes. Post-pandemic summer 2021 social unrest. I know the US has already experienced social unrest in the wake of the Black Lives Matter movement and in the run-up to the aftermath of the US presidential election chaos. But here in the UK, things have been relatively calm and collective despite the stress to the system caused by the pandemic. I suppose the lockdowns helped in that department. However, even with 5 million UK workers on furlough, the UK youth unemployment has soared, lifting the UK unemployment rate to 5%. That once furlough ends could easily increase by another 50% to 7.5%. That's a lot of unemployed people. Worse still is that Black and Asian unemployment rate is double that of the official unemployment, which is sowing the seeds for a post-pandemic summer of discontent in Britain's inner cities. Demonstrations descending into rioting and looting in Britain's major cities. Trends that are likely to be replicated across the Western world's major cities in a summer of jobless youth discontent. Furthermore, looking at the raw deal students have gotten so far, I forced to pay £9,300 for scam university courses that are basically delivering learning worse than one can get off YouTube. Then there's definitely a great deal of anger brewing in that segment of the youth population. Students have had a raw deal. Hopefully, governments will be able to read the writing on the wall and take preventative action now. Though looking at the actions of governments in the handling of the pandemic, then that seems highly unlikely. So a summer of youth discontent is more probable than not.